Time now for our fantasy football must-starts and must-sits for Week 3. Before we get into it, I wanted to continue to tell you about Overlay DFS. It's daily fantasy football where every matchup is in a start or sit format. We'll get into much more detail later in the video, but for now, here are your starts and sits. With quarterbacks, the must-starts: Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Cam Newton, and Jimmy Garoppolo. And the sleeper of the week, Josh Allen. The Bengals defense has given up on average 19 fantasy points a game to quarterbacks this season. We all know Allen can run, having 17 carries in the last 2 games. With the Bengals having a terrible rush defense, Allen has nothing but upside. The must-sits: Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Derek Carr, Mason Rudolph, and Mitch Trubisky. And the bust of the week, Kyler Murray. Murray has been a decent fantasy quarterback so far this season. Carolina, however, has allowed on average less than 200 yards passing to opposing quarterbacks. With Murray generating most of his fantasy points from passing yards, this will not go well for him. Running backs, the must-starts: Devin Singletary, Chris Carson, Phillip Lindsay, Marlon Mack, and Mark Ingram. And the sleeper of the week, Carlos Hyde. It's promising to know that Hyde received 20 carries last week, showing that the Texans are comfortable with him as the workhorse back. The Chargers have given up a touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks to opposing running backs, so Hyde should be a solid flex play this week. The must-sits: Jordan Howard, Kenyon Drake, Ronald Jones, Malcolm Brown, and LaShawn McCoy. And the bust of the week, Adrian Peterson. Peterson had an okay fantasy outing last week, with his touchdown eventually saving fantasy owners. This week, he faces a Bears defense that hasn't allowed a touchdown to a running back this season. Wide receivers, the must-starts: Chris Godwin, DJ Moore, Emmanuel Sanders, T.Y. Hilton, and Marquise Brown. And the sleeper of the week, DK Metcalf. If you haven't caught on yet, Metcalf has been a fantasy darling the last 2 weeks. The Saints have been torched the last 2 weeks by wide receivers, and it should continue this week. Start both Metcalf and Tyler Lockett with confidence. The must-sits: Robbie Anderson, Marvin Jones, Nelson Aguilar, Robert Woods, and Paul Richardson. And the bust of the week, Josh Gordon. Now this is only in certain circumstances that you sit him. If Antonio Brown hasn't been suspended by the time Sunday rolls around, then Gordon will be the forgotten receiver, as Brady is favoring Brown and Edelman over him. If Antonio Brown is out, I'd start Gordon as your wide receiver too. Otherwise, I'd struggle to put him in even as a flex. Alright guys, so back to Overlay DFS. For all the fantasy football lovers out there, this game is perfect for you. All you do is pretty much guess which player is going to have more fantasy points that week. Matchups like Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen, James White or Sony Michel, Zach Ertz or Alshon Jeffrey. If you're perfect in your predictions, you win a grand prize of $25,000. And if you're not perfect, you just got to finish in the top 10% to win 9 times your money. And the bonus jackpot is over that $25,000. I'll be giving more info on it throughout the season, but to sign up, the link is in the description. Go to www.overlaydfs.com. Alright, back to the starts and sets. For tight ends, the must-starts: Austin Hooper, Greg Olsen, Jason Witten, Darren Waller, and George Kittle. I usually don't put obvious must-starts on this list. However, he hasn't produced in the last 2 weeks. I just want to let you guys know, keep your faith in Kittle, start him this week. And the sleeper of the week, O.J. Howard. Alright, so odds are you drafted him kinda high, and he hasn't done anything. This is the perfect time for a bounce back week. First off, the Giants defense is bad. Against tight ends, they've allowed 2 touchdowns to the position so far. As for Howard, last week against Carolina, he was open in the end zone for a touchdown. Winston saw him open, they locked eyes, but eventually settled with Chris Godwin for the score. But just know that Howard is on Winston's radar and gets open in the end zone. The must-sits: TJ Hawkinson, Tyler Eifert, Jared Cook, Jimmy Graham, and Noah Fant. And the bust of the week, Will Dissly. You should add him off the waivers for next week against the Cardinals, but don't bank on him this week. The Saints have actually been good against tight ends, meaning that Seattle would dissect the defense through the receivers and running backs. Dissly is too inconsistent to trust. Kickers, the must-starts: Matt Bryant, Joey Slye, Brett Maher, Eddie Pinheiro, and Mason Crosby. And the sleeper of the week, Dan Bailey. Bailey was once regarded as one of the most accurate kickers in NFL history when he was with the Cowboys. His stint with the Vikings hasn't been the greatest, but I would keep him in against a Raiders team that allowed many opportunities to Brandon McManus in Week 1 and allowed the Chiefs to get into field goal range easily in Week 2. The must-sits: Matt Gay, Randy Bullock, Brandon McManus, Daniel Carlson, and Chris Boswell. And the bust of the week, Kaimi Fairbairn. I don't know what it is, but opposing kickers that have faced the Chargers this year have missed 3 extra points and 1 field goal. On top of that, they didn't even allow many attempts for Matt Prater last week. Kickers that face the Chargers might be cursed. Defense and special teams, the must-starts: the Bills, Falcons, Cowboys, Vikings, and the Patriots. And the sleeper of the week, the Green Bay Packers. I think it's safe to say that the Packers' defense has improved heavily this season, limiting Chicago to just 3 points and Minnesota to 16. Denver has scored 16 points in each of the last 2 games, so if you're in need of a streamer this week, pick up Green Bay. The must-sits: the Browns, Panthers, Broncos, Chargers, and the Ravens. And the bust of the week, the LA Rams. Talent-wise, the Rams have a loaded defense. They've proved to be effective as well in Week 2 against the Saints. But that was without Drew Brees. When they face an offense that has superstar potential, they aren't terrible, but they aren't great. And that's the case this week against the Browns. As always, be sure to like this video and leave a comment down below. You guys have been wonderful with asking your fantasy football questions, and I want that to continue. I'm going to try to answer as many as I can, but if I can't get to you, this video is going to be a thread for you guys to ask your questions and other people respond and help you out as well. And again, be sure to check out www.overlaydfs.com to play daily fantasy football for a chance to win $25,000. I had the opportunity to play this for the first time last week, and it was so much fun. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and best of luck in Week 3.